I'm comfortable getting to the point where they can push me till I pass out or they kill me or something, but I'll be damned if I quit.
Let's go.
Welcome to Citizen. We've got a special guest today, Brandon Daugherty. You got a lot going on. Former PJ, if I'm not mistaken. Is that right?
Yeah, I'm actually still currently a reservist, so I guess former PJ, but still kind of hanging in there on the weekends.
Great. And you run a company that I don't think a lot of people have heard of, to be honest, but you do a lot of cool, like super cool shit, Operator Solutions. But we'll get into that later. First, let's talk about how you got started in the Air Force. Like, how, what was it that made you join in the first place?
Yeah, so there's probably a lot of people around my age group. I'm 40 years old that were, either in high school or getting ready to graduate around the time the towers fell, and that was certainly the case for me. I was, in a little podunk high school and didn't really have a lot going on. Was kind of low, bottom of my class, I guess I'd say, and I had no idea what I wanted to do when I graduated. Had an older brother that joined the Marine Corps. The towers fell when I was a junior in high school, and so at that point, I decided I wanted to serve my country, and I asked my older brother, who was a Marine, what I should do, and he was stuck in like some really shitty area in Kuwait or something. And he says, "Hey man, whatever you do, don't join the Marine Corps." He's like, join the Air Force, man. I love you. I want the best for you. And these Air Force guys got it made. So I joined the Air Force. So I went to the recruiter and I asked him, hey, I'm kind of competitive. My brother's about a year and a half older than me. I said, what job do you have where, I could kind of hang in there with my brother and he's not going to laugh at me. And the recruiter told me, well, you can be an Air Force PJ, but you probably won't make it. So, but you could try for it. So at that point, I kind of had the goal set that I wanted to not just serve my country, but I wanted to become a PJ. Started doing some research on it, and it fell right in line with my background. I was a swimmer in high school and an athlete, and so I wanted to give it a shot. So that's kind of how I got started initially, and why I decided to join the military, and also why I joined the Air Force to become a PJ.
For our non-Air Force audience, tell us what a PJ is.
Yeah, so pararescue, man, it's interesting because a lot of people don't know what PJs are. An Air Force PJ is more than a medic. I tell people they're more like a professional problem solver. So by history, we're the team that goes in behind enemy lines and go gets fighter pilots that were shot down anywhere in the world. That realistically, it's expanded to really using some of our skill sets to be able to rescue anybody in any precarious situation anywhere in the world. So every PJ is a paramedic. They're also free fall parachutist, static line parachutist, trained in rescue, trained in tactics and helicopter operations, aircraft operations. They're all combat divers. So very extensive skill set, and kind of go by the, I guess I would say the mantra of, we kind of do everything, but we're not really masters at any one single discipline. What I would say is that we're trained to really think outside the box and approach very precarious situations in a different way. We typically operate in very small teams, very selective process to get through the pipeline. It takes most people 18 months to 3 years to get through the pipeline of schools. And once you get in, it's a pretty kick-ass job. There's only about 500 PJs in the whole world. That's why most people don't know about us. But we do fall under Air Force Special Warfare, and there's a couple different avenues you can go down, whether you go down the Air Force Special Operations Command route or you go through the traditional rescue route. I personally went through the rescue route, and it's served me pretty well throughout my career.
Yeah, it's one of the more, in my opinion, one of the more interesting jobs out there because I have a lot of friends who started their service in the '90s, even in the soft community, and uh, the aside from the soft guys, most dudes didn't deploy at all. There's like some people with 82nd, third ID that spent some time in the Balkans, I guess. And then if the guy was around long enough, maybe Gulf One or something like that. But that person would be getting ready to get out by now, or would have been out for some time by now. But PJs are an MOS that even before the GWAT were pretty. I mean, that you are pretty. You expect to go somewhere on a semi-regular basis. One, because of the mission, and then two, because like you said, there's not that many of them. There's 500 now, but I don't think there were 500 in the '90s. I think it was quite a bit less, like 300, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, so I joined in '02, and when I came in, I actually was under AFSOC initially, and there was maybe 300,
Mm,
days out there. Only a handful of bases that we really operate out of, and like I said, we typically operate out of really small teams, so there's not a lot of us, but it's kind of the hidden secret in the military, honestly, because you get paid really well, you get all the special duty pays, and they, throw a lot of big reenlistment bonuses at you and stuff like that to keep you in because they've invested a lot of money in you, and it's been a really tough selection to get you all the way, to the point where you actually graduate. But you also get like the most kick-ass TDYs, and so it turns out to be pretty cool, and you're always kind of in the action. So the unique thing, I guess, about PJs is that you never really get to plan what the mission is. Now, there are some teams that you can attach to, like I'm sure you maybe have worked with some PJs that are
mm,
attached to, some of the assaulter teams, and they can pre-plan their missions. But for a guy like me who's, traditional rescue, I'm kind of just sitting alert and waiting for something bad to happen, and then you just have to react to it. So it's pretty exciting, but you're never really fighting on your terms. You're kind of fighting on the enemy's terms, and you're going in with limited information, and you just got to figure it out on the fly, and make something miraculous happen. And we live by the motto that others may live. So
mm.
constantly putting ourselves out there and just trying to bring our warfighters home.
Yeah, I mean it's that others may live is the core mantra, the motto, I suppose, of PJs. I just talked to CZ about this a couple weeks ago. Um, it's one of the it's one of the few career fields. It may be the only one, actually. I don't know for sure about this, but it may be the only one where you're both in the fight, exposed to violence on a regular basis, but also the entire job is kind of based around service to your peers in one way or another. I guess you could say that the line medic and infantry platoons and shit like that is similar.
Yeah.
But that's like day-to-day maintenance. You're part of the unit there, right? You're working with the same guys every day. PJs are, I mean, it's like the ultimate uh, 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 quick reaction force, right? But when shit goes completely sideways, and I wonder if there isn't something in the pipeline, because it is the pipeline for AFSOC and special forces and some of these other groups, as opposed to like regular infantry or airborne infantry like I was, is the duration of the training, right? So it's more on the British model of infantry training, or the Israeli, the IDF model of infantry training, which is where you have a full year of training before you ever go to your unit, and then there's more training before you ever deploy. So I wonder if there isn't, from your experience, if there wasn't something about, I don't know how any of this works. I'm curious. I know there's a peer review process in a lot of selections. Is there something like that in the PJ pipeline or in the AFSOC pipeline? And what part does the selflessness play, like being a legit team member? Because there's some, like, if you go to tier one selection, it isn't necessarily all about teamwork. Some of it's just about your individual capability and stuff like that. And then when it's tier two stuff, a lot of time it is about more focused on the teamwork and stuff. I wonder what it was for you guys.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, and one I've not really thought too much about. But now that you bring it up, I can reflect back on several instances. Well, to put it in context, I was an 18-year-old punk kid when I joined. I had no clue what I was getting into, and I did all the research in the world. But at the end of the day, the resources that we had back in 2000, early 2000s when I was looking into PJs there wasn't as much info as there is today, right? So I wasn't able to really find a mentor or somebody who was. I've never talked to a PJ until I actually graduated Indoc, or going through
Mm.
Indoc with our instructors. So I had no idea what I was getting myself into. I just knew I had some basic stuff that you could Google search on, how many push-ups and your runs and swims and stuff like that. But I didn't really know what was involved. So I showed up and I was like bottom of my class, man. I had a dude in my roommate was actually a force recon guy that had already been through scuba school, and he was like, "Hey, man, if you stick with me, I'm going to get you through this." And we had like 130 people to start out. We also had another guy in our class that was like a ranger, and we had some other guys that cross trained into pararescue. And as we started losing guys, they told me at the beginning. They said, look around, and roughly 10% of you are going to be here at the end, and that's been the 90% attrition is kind of what it was back then. I think it's might have grown up to maybe 75% attrition now, but it's still pretty high attrition. So I was looking around, and I was like, okay, 130 people. That means 13 people are going to make it at the end. And this dude's a college swimmer, and this dude's a recon guy. He's definitely going to make it. This guy's a ranger. He's definitely going to make it. And this guy, I started going through the list, and I was somewhere around like 50 or 60, where it's like these guys are all going to make it before me. And I had no clue, what I was getting into. So I just kind of took the mindset of, well, you know what? Um, they're I'm comfortable getting to the point where they can push me till I pass out or they kill me or something, but I'll be damned if I quit. And so that was kind of my mindset going into it. And then I tried to just be the gray man, tried to stay quiet and, just kind of put my head down and go. But there was absolutely peer reviews along the way. Luckily, I kind of snuck through there because I was pretty quiet and I just kind of, was meeting the standards. Um, as you progress in, further on into the different training, and you start to lose people, you get down to maybe, 30 or 40 people, then you really start to hone in and they put a little more attention on the individuals. But it wasn't until graduated Indoc in our class, I think we had, in the low 20s. So we were actually a bigger class than some of the previous classes. But it wasn't until we graduated our, the end of our apprentice course, which is for me, it was almost 3 years into it. And we were down to nine. At that point, we basically it was almost weighted much more heavily on peer reviews and how you were as a teammate, not just you didn't have the ability just to kind of blend in anymore at that point. And so and we lost a lot of people along the way for various reasons. But yeah, I think what they're really, we did a lot of assessments, which I thought was very interesting. We did a lot of paper personality tests and all this stuff to kind of see what your mindset was on different things. And I didn't know if that stuff was being graded or not. We didn't really have anybody fail out because of mindset, but at the end of it, it was very interesting. We had a research group pull us aside and say that 99% of our guys are all wired the exact same way. So I don't know if it was more of a special research project to see, if we all had the same traits in common, or if it was somehow, they were, hey, who we're going to focus on and try to weed out the people with the wrong stuff. I don't really know at the end of it. I just know that, somehow I matched the right personality. And so oftentimes when I have people that will try to say, oh, you're a badass because you're a PJ, and I'm sure you get stuff like this too with your background, but I kind of tell them, no, I just think I was born wired a different way, and I was just happened to fall in to the right group to be able to get through it. And I give the credit to God for that one. Not really anything I did. I just kind of stuck in and had some grit and determination and kept my head down, and I was apparently wired the right way.
Yeah, well, I mean, certainly there's something to be said for the company you keep in that regard. Being in the right spot is important, and that's a leadership thing, of course. And as far as the badass thing goes, I don't even think today most people, if you ask them what a pararescueman or PJ is, they have no fucking clue. But there's some examples at least, right? Like we've seen them in movies for years, but I don't think it was ever really made obvious who they were or what they were doing. Like Black Hawk Down, people sawing dudes out of a Apache or Black Hawk, what do you call it? The pilot seats and shit, and doing recovery and rescue. The guy from God, what's the name of that stupid show? Modern Family is one of them. And then the people that yank Tom Berenger out at the end of Sniper, right? Those are pararescuemen, but nobody ever talks about them because they're not Navy SEALs, right? So
Yeah.
they don't write books, so there's no reason to pay attention. But um, it is something now with some of you guys who are more public figures. I mean, certainly with CZ being SEAC, that helped promote the career field a little bit. Um, I wonder, so when they said that you guys are all wired the same, did you get a sense of what they meant by that?
Yeah. Well, I think it was more tied to like an alpha personality. Also, just the way we deal with conflict and the way we look at situations, and really, I guess going back to one of my original statements of thinking outside the box, and just we view problems a different way. And I did a little bit of studying in college of like different personality styles and stuff like that, and they definitely try to pull out, that they'll present you with a problem or a situation, and the way you view it is it kind of fits in a different lane, and everybody kind of has their own, they might fill in a broader bucket, and I'm probably doing a disservice to this, but essentially PJs all kind of think in the same box, which is really kind of more outside the box, right? When something crazy goes on, instead of being very reactionary, we can kind of pull ourselves out and take a deep breath, and we don't let the chaotic situation around us define how we react. And I never really understood the reason why they were selecting for that. I guess I could come up with a million reasons why I think it's important, but I can tell you there's a couple missions that I was on where absolute chaos broke out, and dudes are dying and blowing up, and I see my teammates, my PJs around me, just the way that we are able to focus when all of that crazy stuff is going on. It was like it instantly reminded me of like, okay, this is why they beat the shit out of us in the pool, and they're taking our air away, and they're trying to create all this chaos around us, and they want us to do something, a task. It could be something very simple, tying knots, or doing something underwater, but they take away our air. They try to make it as chaotic as they can, but then they have us do something that's very minuscule, but it takes a lot of focus. And it really clicked for me a couple times on a few missions where I was like, oh, now I understand why that training is important, but I also understand why that's a wiring thing and not something that I can really, train to.
Yeah, I mean
I
it's
mean, I can do it to some degree, I guess.
sure.
But
Yeah, it's being able to compartmentalize in the moment is a really important part of reacting well in a chaotic situation. And it's true of gunfights. I've been in plenty of those. It's definitely true there, so you don't make stupid mistakes. But I think it's even more true, especially true in gunfights where the gunfight is secondary to what your task is, right? Like we had a
yeah,
PAO that was attached to us who's this, he's not even, he's carrying like a sidearm or some shit, and he's walking around in the middle of a gunfight taking pictures. I'm like, dude, you're fucking crazy. I don't know what you're thinking. But the more obvious example are medics and PJs, um, who are spending time collecting or triaging or treating patients in the middle of all this chaos. That's a skill, I guess, to some degree you can train that, but I also think that I think that you have to have some innate proclivity for that sort of behavior before. I don't think you can train somebody who can't do it to do that, frankly.
yeah, no, I would agree with that, and also it is I believe now, and I need to look at, I should know this, I don't, but I believe now they're really weighting the personality test very heavily, honestly, and that may come to a shock to some folks, but it's because if they can determine, if they can in fact prove that these personalities are needed to accomplish the mission, and we can pre-select people that have a better chance of actually getting through based on these personalities, then we can save a lot of tax dollars. And not put people through unnecessary thrash and try to get them through a program that they naturally aren't really meant to fit into, but then find something that they can do. And I know that special op or the community I come from, the special, special warfare, they're really trying to analyze that data and say, hey, well, you probably wouldn't make a good PJ, but you make a really good combat controller, or you'd make a really good special recon guy based on, these traits. Now, I think they still let them try out, but the data suggests that their analysis are correct.
Yeah, for sure. And I think that's a big part of it. And it's good that we're selecting for that because I really don't think you can train somebody into that. And having somebody in that position who doesn't have that quality is going to get people fucked up, frankly. Probably them as well, but more likely other people. And then, the one thing that we never do in the military is take care of the what CZ likes to call the human weapon, right? Like our arms room guy will fucking inspect the shit out of your weapon and make sure you don't turn it in with a piece of dust on it. But there is a lot of dust on us, when we come back home and then when we go back out and deploy again. And after the fact, I think that ability or even proclivity to compartmentalize becomes a real problem because you carry that bullshit back into your civilian life, and you never really learn how to process all that bullshit that you went through. It's like I know this was the case for us. Call it what you want, suck it up, be a man, drive on, whatever stupid platitudes people use. But I assume it was also an issue for you guys when you got back from deployments, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I think because our community is I guess I would almost say desensitized to some degree. They put us through a lot of very crazy training to try to get us prepared for that stuff, which is great. But yeah, there's no doubt that it has to take a toll, especially when you start losing friends, and you start losing, family members, stuff like that. I mean, it's pretty wild. And I have had a lot of friends that have really struggled hard with PTSD, and but I feel like this is a real problem with not taking care of the warfighter, but also who pays the price for that is the family members, and that's who I believe are the heroes, man. The people that kind of get left in the wake, the people that grab onto the coattails and are along for the ride. The kids, the wives. I mean, my wife, she spent 3 years without me as I was various locations all over the world. And that's, when we were newly married, and she had to deal with that as a wife, and she never signed up for that, right? And the other part of that is, um, you know, like my wife had to talk to grieving spouses of buddies that were killed overseas, and she's, pregnant, and she's trying to console a wife that just lost her husband overseas, and they got kids and this and that, and so man, just the mental trauma on our family members is probably just as much, if not far greater than what we see in the service members. So I agree with you, but I believe it extends way beyond the service members and really, really into their families as well.
Sure, yeah. And then that eventually comes back on you too as a provider protector, as an alpha type. When you see that your family's struggling and there's nothing you can do about it because you're the one that's causing a lot of those issues, that's not a great thing for you, right? That's a bad trap to be set in. And we don't really give people the tools to deal with that shit. We have a little questionnaire when you get back from deployment. Hey, you're all right? Sweet. Get the fuck out of here. You know what I mean? And then when you
Yeah.
transition out of the military, or transition from one place to another, it is there's a lot of gaps in that process for sure. How are things for you? So what you were doing Middle East deployments, and then you got this new job developing the pararescue program for NASA to recover astronauts and shit. First, tell me about that job because that sounds really cool. And then second, explain like once your operational tempo in dangerous environments goes down a little bit, what's that transition like for you? Because you're still in uniform doing the job, but it's a whole different experience then.
Yeah, it's wild. I'll start back on the NASA stuff. So just to put it out there up front, I maybe couldn't spell, rocket when I first got this job. I was in Tucson, and I had come off of um, 7 back-to-back deployments that were super rough, and it was right at the peak of the war. And going back to the family, my wife was the one that was like, "Hey, you need to take a knee and throttle back." So at that point, I was 10 years active duty. I decided I was going to just, join the reserves. I wanted to stay in the community. I invested a lot into it. I loved it, but I knew it was going to be a tough pill to swallow for my wife and two kids. And so at that point, I said, well, the best thing to do right now is to throttle back, but stay connected to the community. And so I became a reservist, but then I started working for a job. I was a military contractor in Arizona that was planning a large force rescue exercise called Angel Thunder. This is where we brought like 2,000 people in, and we had all the different special forces would come in and play in our play box for like our sandbox for like 2 weeks, where we would basically put on a full war. And then, the only rule to playing with us, and we pay for everything, is that there had to be some personnel recovery event. And so we had, FBI, DEA, we had SEALs and Rangers, and everybody, Marine guys, everybody was participating, to include aircraft in 25 different nations. So we planned this whole big, large scale war, and we'd put it on, and then, there'd be some personnel recovery events where the PJs would come in, and Air Force Rescue in general would come in and be able to help solve some of those problems. So that was a really cool job. Did that for 3 years, and but we were just getting tired of Arizona, and so we wanted to get somewhere where we could feel the breeze of the ocean, and so we wanted to just get out of there. So I found out about a job that NASA was looking for a PJ to come on board as a government civilian and basically develop their commercial crew program for pararescue, and teach the PJs how to rescue the astronauts. So I kind of told my wife as a joke, and so we're driving to church that evening, and so she actually went in, and I had a resume prepared because I was actually looking for other jobs, so I had a resume prepared. So she actually went in the system and applied for me, and it was in Patrick Air Force Base in Florida, Cocoa Beach, Florida. I mean, who doesn't go there? And so I didn't even apply. I didn't think I had a shot at the job. And but I got a call back, and I got an interview and kind of told them who I was and what I was doing. I was helping run this exercise for the last several years, and so I had PJ experience, but I also had experience with really doing outside the box stuff and planning large exercises and logistics and creating really something almost out of nothing. And then, so that's exactly what they were looking for. So I landed this job in 2015, where I was going to develop, the procedures for NASA. And again, so yeah, it's rescuing astronauts wasn't really new because we had the shuttle, but we didn't really rescue anybody out of the shuttle, because it was a winged aircraft, and so they actually would bail out into the ocean. But PJs were rescuing astronauts back in Apollo, Gemini, Mercury. We hadn't actually rescued anybody out of an actual capsule since, the 70s. So we had to kind of figure it all out from scratch. So my first day on the job, actually, I was driving, and TLF screwed me up, and just like the military stuff goes, trying to move. And so I was staying in this like shitty hotel with my two dogs and my kids up on like the sixth floor of the Hilton. And I was driving in on my first day to work, down US 1 right along the river, and I saw something weird I'd never seen before, and it was an actual launch. I'd never seen a launch before in my whole life, a rocket launch, and so I saw a launch, and I was kind of mesmerized by it. And this was June 28th, 2015, and so I was driving in. I see this thing going up. I'm like, oh wow, that's cool. It's a rocket. And then all of a sudden, something squirrely happens. It starts like zigzagging through the air and then blows up. And so, and so I go in, and I don't know if that's normal. I mean, shit, to me, it just seemed like, oh, well, this is probably what happens out here. And I go in and meet my boss and start talking through everything. And like, yeah, there was a SpaceX rocket that blew up this morning. They're part of the commercial crew program. And oh, by the way, this is now your program. So this is your problem to try to figure out, right? Um, so I started working with SpaceX and Boeing, and spent hundreds of hours out in the ocean with astronauts trying to figure out how to rescue them. What's unique about microgravity, and working with an astronaut who's been up in space, and then also all the different hazards that are on board the spaceship, the hypergalls, and all the things that will like kill you if you breathe them in. And so, I went, I mean, there was a team of folks. I shouldn't say me. There was about nine of us that worked in this organization. Really, really smart people, by the way. And we all had our own little specialties. Some of them were focusing on the aircraft stuff. Some of them were focusing on the medical stuff. There was another PJ, a guy named Brett Manny, incredibly smart. It was really he was working on all the medical stuff. And then my job was really just to try to figure out how to integrate pararescue tactics, techniques, and procedures into that, and then help the spacecraft providers build their spaceships. This is before Boeing or SpaceX really had a finished product. So we worked a lot with them, worked a lot with Artemis, with the Orion, the NASA program,
Hmm.
and just try to help them craft a spaceship that was kind of rescue friendly, and then kind of built the playbook and had no idea what we needed. So I just took our pararescue UTC, which is unit type code, like all the crap that we take with us to war. And I just started going through line by line and, okay, yeah, we could probably use that. We could probably use this. We could probably use this. And went through line by line and eventually, came up with a pretty good product of how we were going to actually rescue folks. Spent a lot of time with test agencies and, airdrop and stuff and specialized equipment. Worked a lot with NASA engineers to build special rafts and stuff that we can actually survive out in the ocean. And so, kind of our charge was that we can keep a critically injured astronaut alive for up to 72 hours out in the ocean without any sort of resupply. So we sent a PJ team in, and it's a long shot into orbit, right? So, and once they get into orbit, they're going around the Earth every 90 minutes,
Hmm.
and it's a couple thousand miles all the way up till they get to around Ireland. And but anywhere in between here and Ireland, if there's a problem with that rocket, that spaceship the on top, the capsule is going to blast off and come down under parachute, and then somebody's got to get out there to get them. And I think there's this like false sense of security amongst some people that there's the Coast Guard is always waiting to come get you. I mean, I could tell you it'll be some cases, 48 hours, 72 hours before there would even be a ship that would be able to get to you. So having a team that can parachute in and come save your ass right away is pretty valuable to NASA, and that's why they invested in that. Hence my job. Now, at the same time, I was also PJ to answer the second part of your question. I was also a PJ and was starting to get up in a little more seniority. At this point, I think I was an E7, working my way up to E8, and eventually, I made E9. But as you start to get more senior in rank, your roles on the team kind of go more into a managerial standpoint. So that's kind of the transition I was starting to make. But I was very active as a PJ reservist. I mean, I was still jumping a couple times a month, if not more, flying once or twice a week, and just trying to stay in the fight. Just because it's kind of a fun thing to do.
Mm.
But at this point in my career now, I was a lot more active back then, and I could get into, I kind of had, they pulled me off of status and in 2018, and since then I haven't been able to do a lot on the military side, do a lot on the civilian side, but that transition was kind of hard for me, honestly.
Yeah. You mentioned something before about, well, a couple of things. One, it's crazy to me that we didn't for 40 years we didn't have PJs teaching NASA how to do recovery. Like that's kind of their specialty. That seems insane, or at least the Coast Guard recovery people, right? Somebody had to be training them, right? You would think.
Well, we did. We did these missions called TOW missions, and I was actually on them where we sit alert, but we don't do anything different than we do for like a pilot, right? So it wasn't really super unique to NASA. It would be like they give you a 1 day PowerPoint class, they give you a spacesuit, and you can show them, get them out. But what you weren't dealing with was the complexities of the capsule itself.
Mm.
So we were trained on recovering astronauts. But this is like literally a dude floating in the ocean that you parachute in and go snatch, just like you would somebody who bailed out of an aircraft or something. The only unique thing about it was the spacesuit, which they gave us some really rudimentary training on, and then a little bit on space medicine, but it wasn't very complex. So yeah, PJ still did that, but it was not as involved as it is now. Like where we actually have dudes, that have to go through 2 weeks of training to actually be qualified to go and do this. It was just like a PowerPoint
Mm.
class and hand you a mock-up spacesuit and you go, sit alert somewhere for a little while. So, but now it's much more involved, honestly.
And you said something about, well, space medicine sounds awesome. I don't know why. It just sounds like space drugs to me. But working with a guy who's been in space, they lose quite a bit of bone density up there. So I imagine you're dealing with somebody that's weaker than you might expect them to be under the conditions, right? Especially if they've been
Yeah.
sitting out there for 72 hours waiting for you.
Yeah, so this is mainly on the reentry stuff is where we worry about this. So if somebody's been up in space for a while, right, and they start to lose bone density, their neurovestibular system's all
Mm,
out of whack. So like if they look left too fast or something, they'll just start projectile vomiting,
mm,
and it's never good when you're out in the middle of the ocean. But on the way up, they're just like a normal human. On the way back, they're a lot different. You treat them like your buddy that you're prying out of the bar at 2 a.m., right? They're just like you're trying to keep them, you're just trying to get them home, right? So
sure.
you're very gentle with them. You're trying to, they might be throwing up and stuff like that. And that's kind of how we talk about treating them is,
Well, luckily we have a little bit of experience there. I don't think you need to
yeah.
do a training class for that.
No, no, no. Yeah, yeah. The good thing is going through school, we got a lot of training in prying our buddies out of bars at 2 a.m.
Yeah. So another question I had about that is going through that process for however many years it was were there any lessons learned that made their way back to AFSOC? Like, did you learn something on that job that you could apply back to the military aspect?
Yeah, so interestingly enough, I could see in my screen the picture of the over there, the dudes on the raft, right? So
Mm,
that's it's called we call it the front porch, but it's like the NASA recovery raft. So working with NASA, we had to solve the problem for somebody out at sea for a very long time, and traditionally we've just had like 20-man life rafts or the survival rafts or whatever, and you get in, it's just this nasty, soupy mess of water, and dudes are cold, and it's kind of a terrible situation. You're basically just surviving. Well, we actually created a raft that it lifts you up about 18 inches off the water, and it's rigid. So it's like one of those hard stand-up paddle boards,
mm,
and it has all the ballasting systems and all this really cool stuff inside. So we're not just surviving; we can actually provide treatment to them. And so we're implementing those rafts in open ocean mass casualties. So and you can imagine, and we had to create this raft to be able to survive anywhere in the world. So, we could literally be somewhere where the water temperature is, at freezing or below freezing, and we could still keep somebody warm and safe and do medical treatment on them and not just survive. And so, coming up with implementations where um, we can actually do open ocean mass casualty. And so that's a big deal going forward. And also that's something that, my company's looking into as well is really there's nobody who's doing this right now. And if there was an airliner or something that went down, trying to get dudes on the X quickly and be able to provide some sort of a open ocean mass casualty is it's really just there's a false sense of security out there that we're going to go out there and do it right because nobody's really practicing. Nobody has the tools or the techniques to be able to do something like that. And so on the military side, the military has been very interested in some of the technologies and some of the things that we've built for the NASA program that has helped out the warfighter. Another side of that is this carbon fiber dive system. Now, this is something that we
mm,
never really worked with in the Air Force much. When I went through Key West, the CDQC, and we dove the dragger, and we had some smaller, lightweight dive stuff, but we didn't really have like a carbon fiber scuba system. And throughout building this program, we realized, you're going to be out in the middle of the ocean, and we use jet skis to actually pull and to stabilize the capsule. And if you think about like a ship out in the ocean, it's just kind of moving back and forth. Well, if it's underway, then it stabilizes.
mm.
So that's the easiest way to stabilize like SpaceX's Crew Dragon because it sits really high in the water. Is the best way to stabilize it if it's kind of getting crazy is to actually tow it and stabilize it. So we use jet skis to stabilize it. Well, uh, riding on a jet ski out in the middle of the ocean, big waves and stuff, you don't want freaking scuba tanks on your back, man. That's gonna kill somebody. And then also now you got to get off and the reason you're wearing this is because all of the hypergalls on board the spaceship, if you breathe them in, they literally will kill you. And so you gotta have full PPE on, and full enclosed self-contained breathing apparatus, right? And so basically, also when you get there, you don't want something heavy on your back, but when you get to the capsule, you got to climb in and pull four humans out, right? So you also don't want heavy ass scuba tanks on your back. So we actually worked with Interspiro, started using a carbon fiber dive system that's low profile and works out really well. And they actually got it on the approved for Navy use, the ANU, and or whatever that stands for now, but the ANU.
Mm.
And so the military can use it for any sort of operations. And so yeah, some of the stuff we've developed has really helped out our brothers and sisters overseas. And then also on that note, we also came up with new ways with our helicopters to be able to fit patients in. So the way the helicopters are, they kind of bow out in the middle,
Mm.
and so we actually came up with these stanchions that would raise the patients up so that we can have two patients on either side and then two patients stacked underneath them. And I spent a lot of time in Afghanistan where we would not be able to fit the amount of people in the back of the helicopter that we needed to. And so just by simply coming up with this system that we were using for NASA, we were able to send that overseas, and our guys and gals overseas were able to implement those same tactics and be able to fit more people in the helicopter. So there's quite a bit that we did that actually helped out the warfighter, believe it or not.
Yeah, that's interesting. So you're talking about like Sea King, Sea Stallion, and Blackhawks and shit like that. You would just have two
Yeah,
patients on
Blackhawks
each side.
yeah, primarily Blackhawks are what we're using. Pavehawks, the Air Force
Mm. Yeah,
version,
yeah.
are refuelable.
Okay, that's interesting. You mentioned a phrase that I am unfamiliar with. I think it's hyperballs or some shit. Is that what you said? Can you explain what that is?
Hypergol. Yeah,
Hyper.
hypergulls. And really, this is what the rockets, the way the fuel works. So they'll have two different sort of fuels that when they actually connect with each other, they cause an explosion and they cause, they essentially it's what they use to as rocket fuel.
Mhm.
So um, some of the different space companies will use different agents, but they're all pretty toxic. So, like for instance, monomethyl hydrazine and nitrogen hexoxide, when those two meet, it causes an explosion and it'll cause, just a massive amount of thrust. And this is what the rockets will use to actually propel them into space. So they're called hypergalls, and it's really just a class of propellants that are used and but they can be very toxic.
I see. So you can't. This is on what, some internal chamber of the recovery pod or some shit, or where is this? Where are you being exposed to this stuff?
Yeah, so well, if you think about it this way, you have a rocket that's traveling incredibly fast to get to space, right? To get to orbit. So in order for a capsule at the end of that rocket to have enough thrust to blast off of that rocket and then come down under parachute, they got they got to have some pretty intense engines on those. So like SpaceX will have they'll have they call them Super Draco engines that are on the side. Initially, they were created to be able to use as thrusters that they can have propulsive landings, but they're used also in the escape system. So they'll fire those if there's any sort of an anomaly as they're flying up to space, and it'll actually pull the spaceship off of the rocket and far enough to where then it could come down under parachute. So it's kind of like how ejection seat in an
Mm.
F-16, where they pull the handles and that thing blasts off some rocket motors and it'll propel their seat out of the aircraft. Same sort of concept with these rockets. And so now the capsules with people in them are going to blast off with these big ass engines and will blast off into the middle of the ocean and come down on a parachute. So those engines and now in a normal situation, they're not like just free flowing the gases, the hypergalls when it lands. However, there a lot of times there'll be some residue, or if there's like a stuck thruster or something like that, then it can continue to emit one or both of those gases into the into the atmosphere. So you definitely don't want to come up without some sort of breathing apparatus
Hmm.
to check. So we actually have sensors that we'll carry with us, and hazard detectors that are programmed to be able to detect those chemicals. And so the one of the first things we'll do is go up and kind of sweep the capsule and make sure there's none of those thrusters are emitting any of those toxins. But we have to be on full scuba in order to do that.
Hmm. Interesting. Yeah, so it's good. I mean, like the public-private partnership there, kind of mutually beneficial to a large degree. And I don't know if NASA is ever going to make a comeback to what it was back in the day, but certainly these private companies are interested in for one reason or another. I mean, I'm sure there's got to be a monetary component to it. Nobody does anything for free. I don't know
Yeah.
if they're just laying the ground for space mining or some shit, or if it's space tourism where they're trying to make money or what, but or just like taking over government contracts for NASA. But there's definitely a lot going on there. And similarly, you've got this private for-profit company, Operator Solutions. Tell me about that.
Yeah. So the whole time, the team built the program to do it for NASA, there was always this question, well, who's going to do this for private industry? Because, you can't take a bunch of special operators and put them on an airplane to sit alert for, Britney Spears if she wants to go to space, right? Like you can do that for a NASA astronaut, government on government. But what happens when we start launching tourists and other space travelers and, commercial astronauts up to space? All of these companies, SpaceX, Boeing, Blue Origin, there's a long list of them. I mean, there's like, in the high 20s of number of companies that are developing this capability to send people into space. So who's going to actually sit alert and provide rescue to these companies? Just so happens that, while we were building the program, I just kind of got interested in this. I was also going through to college to get my MBA. And so I thought, hey, just as a beta test, I would just kind of put this out there as a thesis for my capstone project and my master's to see if any of these companies, if this is actually a viable business. I did it more so just as a project for school, but as the industry, some of the folks that I talked to, they were all concerned about this as well. And so I saw that the demand was very high. And at that point, I just started becoming more and more interested in, well, how would I actually do this? How would I actually start a company that would do the same thing we're doing for the military on the private sector? So, yeah, I grabbed the two smartest dudes I could grab onto. A guy named Shane Smith. He's our CFO. He was also the command chief at the time of the rescue wing that I was at, and then another chief, Chris Leas, who was our COO of our company. And he was mainly the guy who I brought over to help me develop a lot of these procedures when I was working for NASA doing this stuff. And so kind of put our heads together and we came up with a business plan and a business model and then just decided that we would actually jump in and start this. And Axiom was our very first client. And Axiom was a company that was going to be flying on a SpaceX Crew Dragon, but they had a contract with NASA to build onto the International Space Station, and they're going to be building their modules onto the station, and then eventually the whole International Space Station, when it reaches its service life, is actually going to be deorbited, and
Hmm.
then the Axiom station will be up there. And so they won that contract, so they were going to start flying people to space to stay at the station in order to start to understand this process of how it would work. And so they were the first company that was in line to need this capability. And so they talked to us and we came up with a game plan where we would actually, start a company that can provide this. And Axiom helped us out quite a bit. So, we kind of we made the decision early on in dealing with Axiom that we did not want to work only for Axiom, that this was a need that the entire industry had. And if we were just to do this for one company, then it would leave a lot of people at risk. And so we came up with a very interesting business model where they would purchase the majority of the equipment up front. And then if we service any other providers, that we can actually use that equipment as long as they get a percentage of the profits from that. we could service, other clients. And so that's kind of how the business started. We have since then done a lot of very interesting things, and we've ventured into some other realms beyond just doing space stuff. I mean, we're working with other companies doing very interesting things. So we trying to figure out how we can get a force basically of military dudes and military capabilities with aircraft and parachutes and all the different things you have in the military. A lot of folks take that for granted. So it was definitely a fun project trying to figure out how to solve that for the commercial industry, and then how do you get insurance for that sort of thing, which was one of our biggest obstacles. But if we started a company in 2020 officially, I didn't leave my government job until 2021, and then we supported in summer of 2021, and then we supported Axiom in the fall of 21. So it was a pretty fast transition. It wasn't very long ago that all that went down, and our company has been growing exponentially. And we've held alert for several space missions and other unique missions as well. I think we were initially called on here to talk about the Alpha 5 project, was really interesting. I'm sure we'll get to that in a second, but everything we do, we try to give back to the community, and so and try to make the world a safer place and a better place, and just try to do our part as good American warfighters.
Yeah, that idea about moving things around. What That's John Pershing, right? Infantry wins battles, logistics win wars.
Yep.
That's a problem that we always have to solve, for every generation of warfighter. And we've that insurance thing is real, man. We've run into that with our recovery operations for U.S. sits around the world. Whenever some bullshit goes down, we'll send people in. We got people down in Haiti right now. It's like getting aircraft or boats insured for an operation like that. Good fucking luck, buddy. It ain't happening.
Yeah.
Like, nobody's going to insure that, and it is what it is. You just got to eat it sometimes. But now you mentioned it. Let's get to Alpha 5. This is a crazy ass story. I mean, I was always jealous of the Australians because you can get balloon jump wings over there. And I don't know. I've never met anybody in the U.S. military that had an opportunity to do that shit. Because it's only I think it's only a couple of dudes up in the balloon, and there's there's a jump master and then the balloon operator and whomever's jumping typically, right? At least for their shit. I was always jealous of that because that would be the most ridiculous device to have on your Class A uniform. This is the big fucking
Yeah.
hot air balloon. But tell me about this Alpha 5 thing because it's pretty wild. You guys were up there.
Yeah, yeah. So we were pretty high. I'll start with kind of a little bit of background on how Alpha 5 started. So, I talked about our company starting with the Axiom mission. Well, there was an astronaut on there, Larry Connor, who is just an incredible human being, and he was absolutely the driver behind Alpha 5. But the story goes, it kind of takes a step back to when he was going to space. So, first Axiom crew, he was the pilot, and part of their training was they were going to come through and work with us. And we were a new company. We hadn't validated that we could actually do what we say we can do, that we can actually get civilian C-130, load up all of the equipment. I mean, we're talking boats and jet skis and specialized equipment, and make sure we have all the right shackles and releases and everything that you would actually need to be able to airdrop this stuff out in the middle of the ocean safely. And then also, having a team to be able to jump out and jump to that equipment and then get that over to the spaceship. So we hadn't validated yet that this could be done. In fact, even at my NASA job, at this point, we had not done an end-to-end exercise where we had actually proven that we could rescue an astronaut by committing forces out of an aircraft, jumping in the ocean, pulling him out of an actual spaceship, and then getting him to the hospital. So we thought it was the right thing to do, that we could actually put on a validation exercise to prove to the world that we can do this as a commercial company. And by this point, we did have all the right things in place with insurance and aircraft and all the nitnoid logistics that we had to get done. And so when Larry and his group, the four astronauts came through our facility, part of it we talked to them about getting ready for rescue and this and that. We had invited them to our validation exercise, which was going to happen a few months later. This was in January of 21. And so Larry actually asked the question, well, who are you guys using as astronauts that are going to be in your spaceship out in the ocean? And we said, well, we're probably going to have a couple survival experts or somebody, military guys, out there, and they'll be playing astronauts. And Larry was like, bullshit, you're going to use us. And
Yeah.
so, which I thought was great.
Mhm.
It's like, okay, well, now I'm going to put three billionaires and a Hall of Fame astronaut in a spaceship in the middle of the ocean, and we're going to parachute to them. We're going to hoist them out and, fly over. And so, like, it's funny because, like, you could see the wheels turning with the leadership at like Axiom and some of these other places. Like, there's no way that's going to happen. And it's really funny because it's like they kind of, pulled the leadership aside and were like, I guess when you're the guy writing the check, you have a little more say in what you can and can't do, right? And so next thing you know, we're actually preparing for having them as our survivors out in the ocean. And so we pulled off the event. We actually took. It was wild because there was an actual launch going on that same day. And so we got to watch a launch go up when these guys are out in the ocean. We had an actual SpaceX capsule that SpaceX was helping participate. They put a capsule in the water that it's the same one that we use training with the NASA folks. And we had that out in the ocean. We had the actual crew inside the capsule, and then we had our guys. C-130 flew in and had our command and control up and running. Everybody was talking to each other. Our guys parachuted in, opened up all the rafts and all the boats, and came in with their SCBA on the jet skis and cleared the area, opened up the hatch, pulled the crew out onto that survival raft I was telling you about. And then we had a helicopter come in that we're working with and hoist them out of the ocean. We flew them to the hospital and dropped them off. And it was really good for us to validate that we could actually do this. And well, after that, Larry had such a blast that he actually wrote a letter to Mike Suffredini, the CEO of Axiom, and said, "Hey, in this whole year of training to be an astronaut, this was like the highlight of my training, and I had such a good time." And then Larry actually came to me and said, hey, Brandon, after they landed now, after they've been to space, they came down the day after they were having a social. And Larry pulls me aside and starts to ask me some questions about, hey, listen, I've kind of checked this box. I'm an astronaut. Hey, I've done all this stuff now, but I've always wanted to do a really high altitude jump. You think we can get a team together and pull it off? And I told him, I said, hey Larry, I've done some high altitude jumps before, and I know that the one thing I know I can do is that we can do as a company is that we can assemble the right people to make it happen. Now, I'm personally not the expert in high altitude jumping, but I commit that I can get the right team together to make that happen. So that's kind of how it started. About a year and a half of train up for this. We actually along the way. Larry was adamant, and so was my team, quite frankly, that we didn't want to just do this to be an experience. We wanted to do it for a purpose, right? And that's where we got married up with the Special Operations Warrior Foundation. And you're probably very, very familiar with their organization, right?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. So we did a lot of vetting, by the way. And we looked into dozens and dozens of charities, and we really wanted to support folks that have been to combat and are at the pointy end of the stick there, and we really wanted to make sure that we were helping raise money for an organization that was not just honorable but was making a real difference, right? And so, and I think I told you I'm very passionate about the families that are left behind. And I could tell you, is you're probably in the same boat. What you're thinking about when you're deployed and getting shot at and all that other stuff is not really your own safety. You're thinking about your family that's back home, left in the wake, and if you were to get killed, who is actually going to be the one who is mentoring your son and helping your son graduate high school and teaching him how to be a man and treating your daughter right and what she should look for in a man and all that stuff and just helping them through college and making sure that they're actually successful. So as we were doing all of our vetting along the way, came across Special Operations Warrior Foundation, did a lot of research, and found out that they're the organization that does all of that stuff, that takes care of the children of the special operators who are killed in combat. So we partnered with them, and we built a balloon in. Oh, by the way, one of the logistics we were trying to figure out how to solve is how do you get up to 35,000, which was our goal. How do we get up to 35,000 feet to do a jump? We're looking into aircraft, and there's a couple outfits that don't really have the best safety record.
Oh
And
yeah, yeah. And you also can't like you can't drive a C-130 up there and depressurize at 38,000 feet, right? I mean,
no.
there's not a whole lot of aircraft that even have that capabilities. So far as I know, right?
Yeah, well, so there's a couple. A C-17 can do it, but
Mm,
that's right their limit. C-130 can't really get that high.
mm,
So we were racking our brain. There's a couple European aircraft that can potentially do it. So just kind of came up with this wild idea of, hey, can we do it out of a hot air balloon? Like, can we get a hot air balloon up that high? And just so happens we have a guy on my team named John Clark who his wife Laurel Clark was actually one of the astronauts that was killed in the Columbia.
mm,
It's happened. But John, he's like the world expert on space medicine, and he was actually like the medical director for the Red Bull jump and also Stratex. So like Felix Baumgartner and then also Alan Eustace.
mm.
So he ran all of that stuff, and so he had expertise on how to get a balloon that high, and he knew it could be done and how to do it safely. Um, pulled in some really smart folks. A guy named Rob Dieguez, who pararescue background, but he was doing a lot with with JSOC, and he was teaching at our at one of those courses where they're teaching some of the dudes how to jump high and all that stuff. So he had a lot of experience with high altitude jumping and then running students and people that are not jumpers by nature, how to get. I guess every one of them is a jumper, but to take guys who are mediocre jumpers and make them really good jumpers.
Mm.
So we need somebody like that because, like myself and Chris, my other business partner, we're PJs and we've done high altitude jumps, but we're not, we're by no means am I like a sky hippie hanging out, at the drop zone. I have like all of 600 jumps, right?
Mm.
And you would suspect that people that do this sort of thing probably have thousands of jumps, and there's plenty of guys out there more qualified to do it than me. So we need somebody to take care of us, but then also Larry. Larry had, man, Larry is he's such a badass. He had like 60 jumps or 100 jumps going into this, but they were all in like the 90s, and so he hadn't jumped in years, and so he wanted to get from doing, just getting back into it with very limited jumps, and then definitely not like at least my 600 jumps. A lot of them are hard-earned jumps with O2, nighttime,
Yeah.
night vision. Well, I mean, they're hard jumps, right?
Mm.
But like not just drop zone jumps. But Larry came in completely cold, but man, he just has that drive and that tenacity and that grit. So we had to make sure Larry was safe. And so Rob was putting together the program for him. And then we had another guy, Jimmy Petrolia, who's another PJ that had he actually went up to 37,000 or 38,000. He'd been that high because he has the wingsuit record. So he had done the wingsuit jump, and so we needed another guy, and he was also an AFFI. Him and Rob were both AFFIs, and so we kind of grabbed those two dudes, and then me and Chris were there more so for med support. We were intentionally pulling high, and we were going to land with Larry no matter where he landed, and that was kind of our initial going in. But then it turned into, let's get 5 people and let's take them up to an altitude that nobody has jumped that high as a group, and let's actually, pull off a world record. So in order to do that, we built the world's largest, or the largest hot air balloon built in the U.S. and put all kinds of Special Operations Warrior Foundation stuff all over it, and the Alpha 5 project was what it was called. Larry came up with a name. Alpha being the first and the best. It's and then 5 being the 5 members that were actually going to accomplish it. And then the project really, because it wasn't just an experience, it was actually for a purpose, which was to raise money for Special Operations Warrior Foundation. So we kind of came together with the playbook. We built the balloon, went out to Roswell, New Mexico, partnered with the school out there in New Mexico Military Institute. By the way, if any of your listeners, it's worthwhile to look into that school. Are you familiar with New Mexico Military Institute?
No.
Oh man, it's a really cool organization. There's like 1,000 kids there, anywhere from middle school through junior college. It's like older than the state of New Mexico, but it's a really cool institution. That's it's I mean military institution, but they take kids. It's kind of like it's like a military prep
Hmm.
academy, and but they have incredible. I mean, I think they dump like $20 million a year into their facility. So it's like when you go to their campus, it's in the middle of Roswell, New Mexico, a very unassuming place. But this campus, it's like you're walking through Harvard or something. I mean, so we, you know, we were trying to find a place to launch this balloon, and we needed to launch it during dark hours. So it was either the airfield or it was like this college area, this military institute with the giant stadium lights. And so we went and talked to the college, and they were on board. And so, and man, what a cool school and a bunch of cool cadre. A lot of special ops guys work there as cadre. Um, and so they helped us out a lot. So we launched out of there and we went up to 38,139 feet and jumped out, man. And came down in a five-man formation and then landed out in the middle of the desert. So a lot goes into it. There was like, I mean, we had an incredible O2 technician, Tad Smith. He's done a lot of these sort of things in the past. Shane Wallace, our balloon pilot, was actually he was one of the lead engineers for Spaceship Two for Virgin. So he was a balloon pilot and he had a lot of space experience. And so he was a an odd guy, but an odd fit. But I mean, just an incredible, hardworking dude that was really really good at his craft. I mean, how do you find somebody who has like done something nobody's ever done before, right? Like, where do you find somebody to pilot your balloon to go up to 39,000
Yeah,
feet?
no shit.
So yeah, so I mean, you just friend of a friend of a friend, and that's how this whole team came together. So at the end of this, we had like 60 people participating. A majority of them volunteers, just want to be part of this. And again, our goal was to raise $1 million for Special Operation Warrior Foundation, and it was a mission success. We did the jump, and we raised the money, but would also say that it's a worthwhile cause. Yeah, we're trying to raise $1 million, but they could use a lot more. So, and put a plug in for them, man. Alpha5project.com if you want to donate, any of your listeners want to donate. Very worthwhile cause, and I can give you a personal story of something they benefited. You know, a family that I've seen them actually help out that made it very very trans or very close home to me personally. So great organization and really vouch for them. So that's how the jump went. Super cold. It's like minus 60 up there.
Oh yeah.
And,
I mean, it's 1 degree Fahrenheit colder for every 1,000 feet, right? That you go up.
but that was three, or yeah, it might be one. Yeah, one or three.
Well, I think
But
it's after 10,000 feet. Every additional 1,000 feet, it's a degree cooler, some shit like that. I don't
yeah,
remember exactly what the conversion is. Yeah, but it sucks. I'm sure.
yeah. So we had heated garments, but what I what I can tell you is we launched right at sunrise and or right before sunrise. So we were coming up. It was only about 45 minutes to get up to altitude and 45, 50 minutes to get up to altitude. Had a couple burner problems along the way. And but we were able to get up to altitude, and I can tell you, just absolutely serene, standing out over that ramp, and there's no wind at that altitude, or there's no wind because you're in a balloon.
Mm.
So you're sitting up there looking at New Mexico as the sun's coming up. You can see the curvature of the Earth, really. You see the curvature at that altitude,
Mm.
and no sound, no wind, absolutely serene and beautiful. And then able just to jump out, and then you're going almost 200 miles an hour instantly, right? So it's quite the ride.
That's pretty sweet. Yeah, it's and you guys met your fundraising goal, which is $1 million, right?
We did meet our fundraising goal of $1 million, which was great. I think we exceeded it by a few $1,000s, but it's definitely a cause that I think it's going to be a continual contribution from me and from our company as well. It's yeah, we met our goals, but man, they could always use more, right?
And what's the website again?
Alpha5project.com is how you can see the videos from the jump and all the stuff that we've done. And we did several interviews. We were on Fox and Friends, Newsmax, Forbes, a few other things. But also, it's a way to directly contribute to the Special Operations Warrior Foundation.
Sweet. Um, yeah, that's really cool, man. I like that. It's a great organization. These videos are fucking crazy. So definitely, it's alpha and the number 5 project.com. By the way, You can watch the whole thing. Definitely go check it out. And we gotta get moving here. Tell everybody where they can find you and all the stuff you've got going on.
Yeah, so I'm not like a big social media guy, but you can see what's going on in our company, man. Always something cool going on with us. os-rescue.com. That's Oscar Sierra dash rescue rescue.com. We do have like an Instagram and a few other things, but I don't manage that stuff. But always something cool going on. You can check out our website. It does have links to all of that, and we're kind of up to something new every month, whether it's working. The cool thing about our company is that we kind of are working with everybody from, SpaceX to Boeing, Sierra Space Perspective, that balloon that goes up to the stratosphere. We're always doing crazy tests and cool stuff with them. So that's where you can click on and learn more. And we're also, providing jobs to folks with special operations background. So it's kind of unique to find somebody who can parachute out in the middle of the ocean. So, there's a tab on our website to fill out the application. We also do Skill Bridge for military guys in transition, and we're a growing company. We hope to, getting ready to build a new facility in Titusville, and going to be about $80 million facility. And so we're growing. The company's thriving, and I would also say, that really it's kind of one of those stories where the risk is worth the reward, but you don't get into something like this without taking risk. And this was one of those situations where I gave up a really good government job, and so did my counterparts. Gave up our jobs, and we just kind of hit the I believe button, and we believed in each other. It was built on trust, and we are doing the right things for the right reasons. And man, it's really paid off. And so I believe that it's going to continue to thrive as long as we surround ourselves by good people and keep doing the right things for the right reasons.
Sweet, man. That's a great story. Glad that you were able to come on today and talk about all this. It's super fascinating, the work as it transitions from, government operations into I guess, technically into the civilian space business now, which is nothing. That's not something I thought was going to happen ever, to be honest. But here we are, and it's super interesting. So yeah, if you guys are interested in checking out what Brandon's got going on, definitely visit those websites. And if you're a special operator getting ready to get out, I know a lot of you are. Take a look at that skill bridge, especially because you get 6 months now on the back end if you're putting in your papers. So definitely check that out. Thanks for coming today, man. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
Yes, sir. Anytime. And thank you all for listening. This has been Citizen.